Great, thank you. And it's good to be here again to give an update. I'm going to tell you what's going on in Washington. First, I'm going to start with an update on the infrastructure law and implementation status. As you know, the president signed the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act into law in November. So now the work has shifted to the federal agencies to implement the programs. And speaking first about the state revolving loan funds, as we've discussed, there's large funding increases and some set-asides for lead pipe replacement and emerging contaminant cleanup. And the Environmental Protection Agency is working on implementing the guidance for the state. So watch that. And I know your State Department of Health, I actually looked at the website today. It looks like they're on top of things, and they've put out a call for projects for fiscal year 2023 and have given guidance to the eligible recipients like yourself to be on the lookout for new information as EPA makes that information available. So
I'm not confused about this. I think we don't think any lead pipes going from reservoirs to houses, but we do have apparently some lead pipe that goes from house lines to faucet, basically, or the meter. Are you suggesting that there is going to be money available for that, first of all, and secondly, that it's going to come through the state as opposed and be administered by the state as opposed to the federal government?
So I'm gonna double check that to be certain, but I did think that there was provision for that element for the house lines to the meters. I'm gonna double check, and I will get back to you to confirm how that's going to work. Right now, all of the money that's currently available is through the state revolving funds, either as loans or grants. So there isn't really any other funding to go from the feds from the EPA. But I'm going to talk about that in a minute because that might change soon. But as of today, that money is all going through the state from the revolving fund for the on the water side. But that might change. So I'll double check that.
We've already applied and been approved for $50,000 for planning. We've been told it's all going to be coming through DWSRF, Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. Right now, it's a 50% loan, 50% grant.
Right.
And grant may go up as when they get more guidance from EPA and more details from EPA.
That's correct. That is all correct.
Do we have an estimate on the cost of doing that work from the?
About $6 million.
What's that?
About $6 million.
$6 million. And
that will be refined as we do. The first 50 grand is going to pay for us to do the detailed analysis of all the homes that were installed in a lead pipe time frame. A lot of those may have been replaced. We don't have records of that. We're going to go in. We'll find out exactly of the 5,000 to 6,000 services, how many of those are going to have to be replaced. We'll get a real detailed budget scope and then go out and get the second round of funding for the replacement.
And if how does it, for replacement, how does it work? I mean, does the federal grant or through the state plus NPU's money pay 100% of the cost of it, or do the homeowners chip in too?
That has not been resolved yet, and more to come on that.
Okay. And so we would end up at this 50-50. We'd be paying $3 million, or are we paying? Is it 12, or we're paying 6?
So yes, 3.
Okay, good. And then, do we know what, like, when the lead piping was, done away with?
Yeah, we have that date. It's a law in the 70s.
Yeah, the 70s. Really. Okay.
And and then they changed solder standards subsequent to that. But this does not do anything for inside the house plumbing. This is from the curb stop to the meter inside the house wall, essentially.
Great, thank you. That was my understanding, but you confirmed that. So thanks for doing that. also just to, let me stay, I was going to shift around, but just so, let me just stay with, on the revolving, state revolving fund money. So in addition to the lead pipe and the emerging contaminant, which it sounds like you don't have an emerging contaminant issue, there are also huge bump ups in funding just for the conventional drinking water and clean water revolving loan funds. So just any other type of infrastructure projects that you would want to do outside of the lead pipe replacement, there's a huge bump up in funding for that as well, with the 50% grant eligibility as part of that. And then there's this, Justice 40 initiative, which says that like 40% of the funding should go to low income areas. So you have a potential to make an argument to the state that you should get a larger amount of funding as a grant versus a loan because of the income requirements. So I think you're going to have a lot of potential opportunity on the two SRFs and the funding. And beyond, and so this is, let me kind of pivot into appropriations, then I'll go back to infrastructure with the energy programs. But so Congress still hasn't completed work on the fiscal year 2022 appropriations laws, even though the new fiscal year started on October 1st. They've been operating under a series of short-term extensions, and the short-term extensions just fund the federal government at fiscal year 2021 levels. The current short-term extension ends February 18th, and the Congress, they've announced that they're not going to be able to complete work before February 18th, mainly because they're taking a recess starting on the end of this week. So they're going to pass another short-term extension to March 11th, and then they're hopeful that they're going to finish work on fiscal year 2022. What that means is that there is going to be additional SRF funding in the fiscal year 2022 bill. Remember, the infrastructure law just provided supplemental funding, but it wasn't meant to supplant the funding for fiscal year 2022. So we're going to see, in addition to what was included in the infrastructure law, some more money for the SRF programs. And so, like I said, this is a really good opportunity for you to make sure you are as aggressive as possible with the state and on top of things to try to go after as much money as you can, because it's like a once in a lifetime opportunity the next 5 years, or once in a five lifetime opportunity, because it's going to go out over the next 5 fiscal years to take advantage of and for all the water infrastructure needs. So that's appropriations. Yeah.
Though the budget is also, the new budget will also extend earmark legislation.
So now let's move on to that. So
Okay.
so the fiscal year 2022 appropriations are getting worked through. You did not get an earmark, or you didn't have a member request an earmark for you in fiscal year 2022, but very, very soon, fiscal year 2023 appropriations efforts are going to begin. And my assumption is that the Congress is going to want to put earmarks in the fiscal year 2023 bill. So we should be thinking about what projects you would want to put forth for fiscal year 2023 and starting to lay the groundwork for that in advance of members of Congress requesting projects.
Susan, do you see any difference in the funding levels that are the sweet spot? We were told for the last 2 rounds that $1.5 million was the right amount. Are you know if they're going to raise those or keep those about that size?
I mean, I don't think anyone really knows. I mean, I think the best test will be to see what happens in fiscal year 2022 when we see that bill ultimately, those numbers ultimately come out, what the size of the requests are. I think you should assume that that's the sweet spot. And then once we see fiscal year 2022, we can see whether they're higher or lower, and we can make some adjustments. But since this is the first time they've had earmarks in, like 10 years, it's hard to say what what the answer, and there's not been anything, no one has made any public statement that says next year we're going to have even bigger earmarks, or we're not going to have earmarks at all, or anything like that. So, so I think it's still a little bit too early to know for sure. So, but we should be thinking about the earmarks, for fiscal year 2023. And if we want to have like a separate discussion on that, we can do that, or however you want to do that.
All right, so we could use that money, the SRF money, for the interconnect, groundwater water interconnect, right?
Correct.
Okay, so the only other water project really is the Deep River transmission main replacement. Is that something that we could, you know, use this money for?
Absolutely, we can ask for that. We also have asked for asbestos cement removal, pipe removal, and that was material put in the 70s, and obviously it's got asbestos in it, and while it works, it's difficult to fix, maintain, and it's getting close to the end of its useful life. So we've applied already this week. We're putting an application together because it was requested from the state for a Caribou Drive area, and we'll be looking at other additions. They just came out last week with a request for additional projects. So this is brand new, and I think it has to do with them expecting a lot more money coming in earlier than later.
And then one last thing, I know there's been talk in the past about extending the water main in Basra out a couple miles out to basically where the veterinary office is because of that pollution problem. Is that something that you can talk to Basra's selectmen about? So it seems that would be a good use of this money. Plus, there's a lot of developable land along that stretch, you know, commercial land that might benefit NPU. Yeah,
so they're looking at Basra on both sides of extensions potentially. So
okay.
We've been working with Franklin recently, and we can re-engage with Basra. The last time we talked with Basra on this was in the summer this year. So,
okay.
But can definitely get back to Basra and Pianca and go from there.
Okay. Yes. So the next thing I wanted, I got, you know, we moving away from water. So looking also at the Department of Transportation and the Department of Energy and their implementation of the infrastructure programs, and the Department of Transportation, the thing we're looking at, because I think you'd expressed interest, is the electric vehicle infrastructure grant program. And I think I'd mentioned previously, but I'll just briefly mention that there's two programs. One is a formula program that goes to the state DOTs. It's probably not relevant because that's meant to install EV infrastructure like along designated EV corridors. So that's like mostly on the interstate or major roads. But then there's a second competitive grant program, and 50% of the money in that program is going to go to community grants. So to put EV infrastructure into communities with a focus on low income communities. So if that's of interest, I mean, nothing's come out. They put out a request for information, but they haven't put out any notice of funding opportunity yet, but just flagging that could be a public-private partnership. So you'd be the, you know, NPU could be a grant recipient, and then you'd enter into a contract if you wanted to with you know, with a private entity that could, you know, build a EV station, and then do some type of a deal, revenue sharing, or some type of P3 arrangement. There's a lot of flexibility there. So I just want to flag that as something that might be of interest to you when that comes up.
Yeah, that is of interest to us, Susan. So any additional information would be great. We got two opportunities that are happening right now. CCOG reached out to us because the infrastructure along, or charging stations along the interstate, were only brought forth in partnership with Eversource and United Illuminating. They missed the munis, and CCOG asked us if we had power available in the Route 2 395 corridor right around Norwich town for a station. We said we have the power available there, and more to come on that. So they're putting one in about every 50 miles, a charging station along all the major federal highways.
So you're okay. So you're interested in a broader program because of the ability to sell electricity, and then you might be interested, I'm assuming, in something in Norwich from that perspective also. So I'll get you a summary of the two programs just so you understand them. You know, again, keep in mind, nothing has happened on either. It's going to take a little while for all these programs to roll out, but it's good for you to know what you care about and for me to know what you care about, because then I can make sure that I keep you in the loop on what's happening. So, yeah.
Would that funding include possibly buying, you know, municipal vehicles for the city of Norwich? Or buses? No.
That's different. I mean, there might be other programs to be able to do that, but this program is solely meant to build stations.
Yeah.
Right?
There's also two other things going on in Norwich. DOT Garage are looking at putting 2 charging stations in for their fleet. And they've approached us to come up with infrastructure costs and estimates and details. So
that's for East Great Plains?
What's that?
East Great Plains?
Yes.
That would be a good location too.
Yep.
In terms of 395.
Okay.
Right.
So it sounds like this might be like right in your sweet spot, some of this money. So this is good to know. Okay, so the other thing is, you know, we've talked about before, there's a couple of under Department of Energy, you know, there's going to be a new competitive grant program to fund innovative approaches to transmission, storage, and distribution infrastructure, to improve resiliency and reliability. That would go to money could go to, and you know, NPU could be a direct applicant to Department of Energy for funding for a competitive grant. So that's not come together yet, but that's something to think about. Talked before, there's a $2.5 billion revolving loan program. And I don't know whether this is up your alley, but this would be the Secretary of Energy can enter into capacity contracts and provide loans basically for a utility to construct electric power transmission lines, but having certainty that there would be offtake. And I don't know whether, you know, the new project, Preston Riverwalk or anything, whether any of that is big enough to try to go after one of those transmission facilitation revolving loans, but flagging that one as that comes together. And then, you know, there's a smart grid investment matching grant for any type of improvements that you'd want to do. You know, that's like smart grid, energy savings type technology that you could be looking at. I think those are the big ones as Department of Energy. And as the criteria come out, I'll let you know about that. And then also a final thing I wanted to mention is in the infrastructure law, there were a number of programs, EPA programs that were authorized but not funded. So they'd have to be funded in a appropriations bill. You know, there's like a wastewater efficiency grant program, an alternative water source program, a clean water infrastructure resiliency program, a mid and large water system resiliency program. Those are not funded yet, but that we'll watch out for those because they could be funded in the next appropriations law. That's all that I have on my what's going on in Washington. Does anyone have additional questions for me?
Can you comment a little bit about economic development type projects, whether there's any money available for that in regular annual budgets or in earmarks or the infrastructure bill or anything else?
Sure. Yeah, and the answer is in the infrastructure bill, I would say no, except to the extent that, you know, a transportation, energy, or water project, you know, results in economic development, right? I guess on the infrastructure bill, like there's money for manufacturing facilities, like for battery manufacturing or you know, there's some like demonstration manufacturing projects, hydrogen, direct air capture, things that are energy related that I assume if you were to get one of those projects, that would be an economic development benefit. But in terms of like specific, like direct economic development funding, the two opportunities are the Economic Development Administration within the Department of Commerce They get funding every year. They got a bunch of new funding in the COVID bill, and I know that's something that the business park North was part of a joint application with others in Connecticut on that. But there's annual money from the Department of Commerce EDA for infrastructure projects, public-private partnerships. You have to show that, and I think, and it sounds like you might have some of this with, Preston Riverwalk or maybe some other projects where you could apply for utility, the utilities or roadways or, other types of public works that would support a private investment. So they're public-private partnerships. You have to show that they're going to create jobs, but you can get money for public works around economic development. It's a great program because there's a revolving application, and so you can submit an application at any point in time. Your local EDA office will work with you and tell you whether your application is good and whether you should keep going through the process. It's a pre-application and then a formal application. So that's something to think about. That gets funded every year. And then also in the from an earmark perspective, in this fiscal year 2022, when Congress brought back earmarks, they did have a category under HUD called economic development initiatives, which were earmarks for economic development projects. So that's something to think about in terms of requesting an earmark for fiscal year 2023.
So what we've sort of been talking about the Preston Riverwalk, I think, and it's got a ways to go and hoops to go through, there's no question about that, but is extending gas to the Preston Riverwalk site, extending higher capacity electric to the site, water and sewer, so that we would serve all four utilities. It's a development being done by the Mohegan tribe. It's not a development. So I would assume that's a positive thing, although I'm not sure the Mohegans are the neediest tribe in the country. We're talking about a $400, $500, $600 million development. So it's lots of jobs, hotels, the whole bit. I guess two questions. One, given we would be working with the tribe to do that, would it be best politically, I guess, for them to take the lead in seeking the grants, or for us to do it, or some combination? And my second question is, what's the view regarding gas? Is it something that's fundable, something that's not fundable? Where's the administration on that?
Okay, so let me try to unpack all those excellent questions. So the fact that the tribe is a tribe that's a wealthy tribe is not a relevant question for EDA funding. So the EDA funding is meant, you look to the area to see whether it's an area that would benefit from economic development, which EDA has been pretty flexible about. So it would seem to me that you'd be able to make the argument that Norwich, that bringing economic development and job creation to Norwich for this project is an economic development purpose, an area that could benefit from the funding, right? So they look at like the census tract of where the project is located, but then they can even, I worked on an economic development project in Houston where the project was actually not going into a qualifying census tract, but they looked beyond that and said, yeah, but it's going to be bringing in employees from low income areas. So the fact that, that's not, the fact that it's the tribe is not a negative. Then the question is, who should be the applicant? Well, the only reason it's even complicated, like let's say this was going to be some private some business that was, you were going to partner with. They were going to do a, some type of a, shopping center or some project or a manufacturing facility. You would have to be the applicant because the applicant has to be the governmental entity. The money goes to the governmental entity. It does not go to the private sector. It goes to the governmental entity to pay for public works infrastructure to benefit a private project. Now, the only reason it even is complicated is because the tribes are considered governmental entities under these laws. So I guess technically the tribe could apply, but frankly, since you're the utility that's going to be benefiting from the funds, I would think it would be you in partnership with NPU in partnership with the tribe.
Okay.
Susan, does it make any difference if the property is located in another town? Because in this case, Preston Riverwalk is located in the town of Preston, which is not probably a distressed community, and, they own the property.
Okay, so it's not distressed. So then I guess we have to make an argument, though, that either, and we have to look and see what the latest are, it was impacted by COVID, which was during COVID, that money didn't have to make, and it was just an assumption that all communities were impacted by COVID. So we could see if we'd still make that argument, or we might say that it's going to draw from Norwich or draw from it's going to create low income jobs. And which is, like I said, the argument we were able to make in Houston for a project that was going to create job opportunities for low income people. So I feel somewhat encouraged.
They live in Norwich, work there.
Pardon?
So my other question was about one of the projects would be a gas line extension, and I don't
That's
know
right.
what gas is verboten or
So I guess the question. So there's nothing in the EDA criteria that says that you can't have gas hookups anymore, right? I mean, gas has become politically unpopular. I think where you'd run into an issue with gas would be if you were like, you wouldn't be able to get like Department of Energy funding for some type of a gas project because all that DOE money is intended to fund either renewable energy or kind of energy efficiency, carbon capture, things like that. So you're not going to be able to get like money for it. But in terms of the EDA program, which is intended, it's intended to fund the public works that you need to make an economic development project come to fruition. And if you're set up for gas hookups, then I don't see why that wouldn't be eligible. There's nothing in the EDA program that says no money can be used for gas. So the question, I guess, is politically, like, in New York, gas has become this big, like negative issue. So I don't know whether you think it would be, if you don't think it's an issue, I'm assuming that's just the way you're set up. Gas is, you're not going to eliminate gas hookups. So I don't see that as a problem. Unless I'm missing something.
I wonder if this gives us a competitive edge over Eversource too, in terms of electricity and gas, being able to potentially use these grant monies to do that work.
That would be a savings to whoever the developer is of that site.
I mean, we can talk about that executive session a little bit later, but I think there's no question that a 4-utility partnership is a negotiated plus.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and one thing let me mention again, which, like I said, is so great about this program is we, and I'm happy to join you. We'd set up a meeting with the EDA administrator for the region that Connecticut is in, and you can have just a general briefing on this is what we're looking at doing. Preston Riverwalk, this is about how many jobs we're going to create. We're going to need to install utilities. If we were to submit an application and asked you for X, what would be your reaction? And just to let you know, South Preston, it's not distressed, but it's surrounded by distressed areas, and it was impacted by COVID, and you get their thoughts, and they'll either say, yeah, we think this sounds really good. This is how you should structure it. Or worst case scenario, they're like, this just isn't going to, based on everything else that's going on in Connecticut and the region, this isn't going to fare well. And then you don't have to waste any more time. So I like this program versus some of the other programs, like the DOT programs, where you don't get an answer until you spend a whole lot of money putting together a grant application. And this one, we could like literally sit down and just like say what we're saying now and get an initial response from them as to, does this sound like something they want to hear more about, or are we completely off the mark?
Okay. Thank you.
So,
Do we have any other questions, or?
Question on, came up in an internal conversation the other day about FEMA's hazard mitigation grant.
Yeah.
And there's some things actually that could be done proactively, I guess, to relocate infrastructure. Do you know anything about that, Susan?
yes. So, so a couple of years ago, FEMA went to a new program called BRIC, B-R-I-C, like Building Resilient Infrastructure Communities or something to that effect. And the money goes to annually to the state, and then you apply to the state for pre-disaster hazard mitigation dollars. And so there was a bump up in funding in the infrastructure law. There was an additional $1 billion for the program that was made available in the infrastructure law. So Connecticut will get more money for hazard mitigation. So, there's FEMA has like the pre-disaster mitigation and the post-disaster mitigation, and the pre-disaster mitigation, which is I think what you're talking about, which is like the hardening, doing things before the disaster. That's the money that now goes out to the state, and then you would apply to the state for a grant. Or you'd apply with the state. I'm trying to remember this now. I think what it is the state applies to FEMA for you. Like you coordinate with the state. It goes through the state. I can send you like the link or the agency or more information if that's helpful.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sure.
All right, any other questions, or should we move on to other items on the agenda? Susan, I think you've been very helpful again. Thank you very much.
Great.
And
Okay.
we are, I think we're going to go into executive session and talk about a couple of legal items, but we appreciate your participation.
Great. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye. And with that in mind, do we want to go into executive session now? Do you want to show us what you've got?
Well, that does have some confidential stuff in it as well, right? So that's,
all right.
So that was planned for executive session.
Oh, what? Okay. So I have a motion to go into executive session.
I'll make that motion.
Bill? Sean, we got a second for you?
Second.
All those in favor? It is unanimous.
Steve, will you stop recording?
I'm gonna stop recording. I gotta boot some people into the